Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar, Tanf and Relationship Education, Lessons Learned from Healthy Marriage and Relationship. We are excited to have a great lineup of expert presenters for you today to discuss today's topic. I am James Butler, and I serve as one of the Family Assistance Program Specialists here in the Office of Family Assistance within the Office of the Administration for Children and Families. So I just want to now take you through a quick tour of how to navigate through the webinar platform. Everyone will be muted during the entire presentation. So if you have questions, you may submit them by using the icon at the bottom of your screen. That will generate a Q&A icon, and you can just click that on and it will generate a question and answer box where you can type in your question or questions. And if you have a question for anyone in particular, you can note that as well. Feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar, and we will respond to your questions towards the end during the Q&A session. We're also going to launch several polls throughout the presentation that will pop up on your screen automatically, also including an evaluation poll at the end of the webinar. You can respond to the polls by clicking on the radio button next to your preferred response. We're going to leave each poll open for approximately 30 seconds before we close it. So what I'd like to do now is turn things over to our facilitator, Robin Senezal, who serves as the Director of Family Strengthening at ICF International. Robin?
Thanks, James. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you join us this afternoon. Very excited about today's presentation. Today's presentation is going to provide a very interesting perspective related to the interconnectedness between the work of TANF agencies and the National Healthy Marriage Initiative. As you'll hear in today's presentation, we all serve the common goal of helping to move families to self-sufficiency. I'll start by offering a brief history of the National Healthy Marriage Initiative and its relationship with TANF funding. I'll offer a community perspective and touch base on the impact of COVID as it relates to family stressors. Then, for the meat of today's program, I'll turn you over to our great presenters. First, you'll hear from Bob Ketchum and Nicola Bass from Youth and Family Services Stronger Family Program, which is a community-based program in Rapid City, South Dakota. And then you'll hear from Dr. Mariana Falconer, Project Director, the Together program at the University of Maryland. So you'll hear from a community-based and a university-based program. Following their presentations, I'll return for a panel discussion, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A. Again, type any of your questions in the Q&A box as we go through the presentation so you don't lose your thoughts, and we'll circle back and cover them later. Before we begin, though, we'd like to take a poll and get a better sense of who our audience is. So let's take a look at the first poll. Here we go. Poll number 1. Which of the following best describes your organization? Are you Tribal TANF, State TANF, National, Family, Social Services Program, a Healthy Marriage Responsible Fatherhood Grantee, or other? And if you check other, please indicate what that means in the chat box so we all know who's with us. And the survey says, all right, looks like the majority of today's attendees are state TANF programs. So that's wonderful. And for the other, let's see, did they type in the chat? No, it does not say. Well, I see we have 6% are other. So I'll be interested to learn more about what that means. All right, so let's move on to, did I hear something?
I coughed.
I can hear. So let's talk a little bit about the Tanf legislation. I know most of you are familiar with this, but I just want to walk through a little bit. So 1996, known as PERORA, Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, is actually the act that authorized temporary assistance for needy families, the TANF program. And it has 4 purposes. Provide assistance to needy families so that children can be cared for in their own homes or in the homes of relatives, in the dependence of needy parents by promoting job preparation, work, and marriage, prevent and reduce the incidence of out-of-wedlock pregnancies, and encourage the formation and maintenance of 2-parent families. Now, what's interesting about TANF is that unfortunately, as it rolled out, so much of the focus was on time-limited benefits and work participation activities that many folks lost sight of what the actual purpose of the legislation was. So with this in mind, let's take another poll question. I'd like to hear your thoughts on which of these goals do you think are supported by healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood programming? A, provide assistance to needy families so that children can be cared in their own homes, in the dependence of needy parents by promoting job prep, work, and marriage, prevent and reduce the incidence of out-of-wedlock pregnancies, or encourage the formation and maintenance of 2-parent families. And you can check more than one. So please indicate which ones you think are supported by healthy marriage programming. All right. Very good, very interesting. So we're very, let's see, 80% said independence of needy parents. That's great. And then we have prevent and reduce incidence of out-of-wedlock pregnancy, encourage formation and maintenance of 2-parent households, and provide assistance to needy families. So the correct answer is actually all 4 of them. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. So what we know from research, and this is the research that is behind the goals of TANF, is that healthy, stable adults equal better outcomes for children. Married couples on average have better physical, emotional health, more wealth accumulation, and a higher level of economic well-being, better relationships with their children, and less risk of substance abuse. Likewise, children of adults with healthy, stable marriages are more likely to do all the things we want them to do well and less of the things we don't. So better physical and emotional health, relationships with their parents, school performance, and fewer behavioral problems in school. So if you think about healthy relationship education and how it can benefit the adults, it can also benefit the children and help to create a more stable home. Next slide. So with that in mind, the National Healthy Marriage and Responsible Fatherhood Initiative kicked off. Now, we heard that in 1996, PERORA actually authorized activities related to these outcomes, but what we found is that a lot of people weren't really clear on what that meant. So it wasn't really until 2005 with the Deficit Reduction Act as part of TANF reauthorization that money was actually earmarked for healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood demonstration initiatives. Now, what was significant about this funding is that it was about demonstration initiatives, right? We weren't really sure what would work and what made the difference. So the opportunities were rather broad to look and consider different options, whether it was different approaches in terms of curriculum, recruitment, retention, programming, and so forth. And then in 2010, more funding was allocated. This time they split the $150 million, $75 million for healthy marriage and $75 million for responsible fatherhood grants. As we learned more, we refined the way that the funding opportunity announcement went out, and there were more requirements that became more prescriptive over time. 2015, another round of funding was released, and then again in 2020. So what's really significant about this is that as we have learned what works and what is necessary to help stabilize families, these programs have been innovated to include that. More standardized data collection, evaluation components, job skills, career advancement, all of these are elements that have progressively become more and more part of the healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood initiatives. So next slide. So I want to share with you a video that I think really captures the essence of big picture what the goal is as it relates to ACF and its effort to improve child outcomes. So it's going to take just a second for us to pull up this video, but I think you're going to enjoy it.
The social challenges that face modern societies, whether it's the ability to work productively, to be a good citizen, stay healthy, have their roots in early health and development. A strong foundation in early childhood results in much better and more effective development later. A weak foundation really puts us behind. The most important thing children need to thrive is to live in an environment of relationships that begins in their family, but also extends out to include adults who are family members in child care centers and other programs. What children need is for that entire environment of relationships to be invested in their healthy development. We've shown from decades of testing interventions that we can improve outcomes. But the magnitude of those impacts is not good enough. Science is now available to help us think about what we might do that would have a bigger impact than the best of what we've done before. So we began to ask, what could we be doing differently? What could we do to be smarter? Children who are at the greatest risk for the poorest outcomes in learning and health and behavior are children who experience a pileup, a cumulative burden of one after another of risk factors. And then the burden is more than any child could be expected to overcome. So we began to focus on the development of the adults. What could we be doing to strengthen the capacity of everyone who interacts with children? This led us to think about the kinds of skills you need to deal with adversity. These skills of focusing attention, planning, monitoring, delaying gratification, being able to solve problems, being able to work in teams, executive function and self-regulation. They're also the kind of skills you need to create a well-regulated home and school environment in which healthy development and learning can take place. And then brain science started to tell us that differences in those skills start to develop in infancy based on the environment kids live in. So how do those skills get built? Well, if you don't develop them early, how do you develop them later? Actually, you can build them later because the period of flexibility and plasticity for this part of the brain doesn't fully mature until age 25 to 30. And then the light bulb went on. The reason we're not getting a bigger impact is not because we don't know about how to influence development, but because we're giving information and advice to people who we need to do active skill building with. Skill building by coaching, by training, by practice, but we're not doing that. So we now have developed this theory of change that says we need to focus on the development of the adults who are important in kids' lives.
So try this.
How does that work?
That's a new idea. Buen trabajo.
We need to focus on their skills, their needs, in order for them to be better, more effective parents, in order for them to be better prepared to be employable, which would enhance the economic stability of the family, which is also good for children. Second of all, we looked at many people in preschool programs and child care centers. And we said, what are we doing to build those skills in the providers? They need skill building as well. And also the community can help to build and reinforce the capacities that parents need. And the community also includes programs in which the people who work in the programs have sufficient skills. Third of all, what are the major sources of toxic stress in this community and how can we reduce them? Moving it up to a policy level, how are our policies strengthening communities' abilities to reduce source of toxic stress and caregivers' abilities to provide what kids need? The development of our human capital is our future. The development of a productive workforce is our future. The development of a healthy population is our future. This kind of future orientation is critical for healthy society, it's critical for a thriving business, it's critical for successful environmental relationships to raise children. It's all about being able to plan for the future, to have a future. And that's why this is so important.
So I mentioned that over the years, progressively, there have been more prescriptive requirements as it relates to healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood programming. And one of the most important elements has been the addition of case management and the expectation, just for the very reasons that we just saw in this video, is that it really does take a village, and we need to be skill building with all of the villagers. And that's a lot of the work that the healthy relationship education organizations are doing. They're doing skill building. And those skills, those interpersonal skills, communication skills, conflict management skills are very important, not only in the family, but they also transfer into the workplace, which helps improve the employability of these families. So it's another way that it's supporting TANF. And so we're all humming along and everything's going great. And then, next slide, please. COVID. Oh my, here it came. And so we suddenly had a whole bunch of compounding stressors that were impacting families across the country, around the world, I should say. Unemployment. Many of us experience either unemployment of our own or family members, friends, financial stressors, lockdowns, school closures, everyone trying to work from home. You've got parents working from home, kids learning from home, all kind of chaos going on in different places. And not to mention, most significant during COVID, the loss of loved ones. And all of this we know has an impact and has had an impact. So let's dig into the impact just a little bit more. Next. So some research that was done basically said marriage stress during COVID was actually often linked to finances. And so what you see in this chart is that those who had declining as it relates to their finances, they were more significantly impacted in terms of stress. Higher rate of stress was perceived in those families. Whereas those who maintained steady financially, they had a lower perception of stress. And then those who actually improved, perhaps they had some sort of business that benefited under the COVID conditions, they actually showed less stress than the decliners did. So it's really interesting to look at, and this is all focused on stress in marriage as it relates specifically to finances. But what I'm curious about now as we get ready to go into our presentation is, what have you seen in your own communities? So let's take a look at this next poll. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected marriages and relationships in the communities you serve? Do you think marriages got stronger or struggling more? Or maybe it's a mix of both stronger or struggling, or you're just not really sure. All right, so 67% feel that there is a mixture of both stronger and struggling. Some not sure. No one felt that marriages are stronger. So I think the best answer is probably the 67% of you are right, that there, in most communities, there is both the stronger and the struggling. It's really interesting. Some of the anecdotal information that we've heard, divorce rates are up. However, there's an interesting combination of those who had strong relationships. For some, the relationships did begin to be stronger, and for some, too much togetherness was too much togetherness. And I see from Carissa, I've seen the pandemic be the reason for relationships begin, and seen divorces and breakups. And that's probably very true. I remember one statistic about roommates wound up having romantic relationships as a result of the lockdown. So all kinds of interesting things happened in the pandemic, not only within our families, but also programmatically for organizations like the two you're going to hear from, and how they were able to navigate providing services to those families. We've seen a lot of interesting things in terms of mental health issues with children, compounded by the isolation, which we know isolation has a strong impact on substance abuse. We've seen a lot of statistics around substance use and misuse increasing during the pandemic. But what I really want to do is jump right into hearing from Bob and Nicole, and they're going to tell you what they've done in South Dakota. They're going to tell you about their program and then tell you how they navigated COVID. So Bob, Nicole?
Well, I'm going to defer to Nicole to start because she's the director of the Family Support and Advocacy Services, and
Sure.
I'm manager of the Stronger Family Program, so I work for her.
All right, so yeah, Bob and I were peers as adult educators under our first grant. We both were hired at the very beginning of that grant, which we were awarded in the 2015 cohort. And then we received both an adult and a youth grant with the current cohort. Next slide. And this is a lot of text and a lot of information, but this is our two grants that we currently have right now, our Stronger Family Program grant. We do our active relationships classes, which are skill building classes for healthy relationships, communication, conflict resolution. And we do offer the family support coaching, is what our version of case management, we call it family support coaches, who walk alongside participants and help them to set and achieve their own goals and transfer skills so they can learn to advocate for themselves. And then we have multiple supplemental classes, which are, we have an introduction to anger management class, we have parenting classes, a blended family class, crucial conversations, and we do Myers-Briggs type assessment and a workshop that goes along with that. And then in our Ready for Life grant, we have a Stronger Youth program where they do relationship skills building in high schools and do some summer activities with community-based youth throughout the summer. Next slide. So this is just pulled right out of our N-Form grant to date. So all of year one, for which our activities started in April of that grant year, and then all through year to date so far in the current grant year. And as you can see, we had about 33% of our participants as Native American, a very small portion of other racial groups, and majority white. But to put that into context, census data for this area would suggest that it's a range of between 8 and 17% that are Native American in our community. So we are serving a much larger than representative population of Native Americans within our programs. Next. And here you can see straight out of our data management system, how many of them are employed and to what extent. And as you can see, just 42% are full-time employed. Not all of these participants are currently in TANF, but many would be TANF eligible. It may be that they're not aware of local TANF programs. It may be that that wasn't the specific referral source. But there's definitely an underemployment factor for a lot of our participants. Next. And here's a little bit more detailed breakdown. You can see about 4% are actually currently receiving TANF, 15 to 20% SSI or SSDI, 30% give or take receiving SNAP benefits, 11 to 17% receiving WIC, and 6 to 7% on Section 8 housing. And you can see again how those break down in our first grant year and our second grant year. So April through September, and then again starting from October through year to date as of now. And we did have in the very beginning of grant year 2, we had a population that was a local church in a neighboring community, which definitely skewed. You can see there's a higher number of that upper income level that we didn't have before, but you can see If you look at just the breakdown, say either none, 1 to 499, or 500 to 1,000, it's over a third of, well, actually it's well over half of the population that we've served in both of the grant years. So again, lots of eligibility, whether or not we only have 4% receiving TANF. Definitely our main demographic is that population. Go ahead and next slide.
And one little thing about that, Nicole, I want to mention is that this area, we don't have wages that match up to, say, the DC area or other large metropolitan areas. So you see an awful lot of those are making, less than $3,000 a month. That's pretty typical for around here and unthinkable in DC.
Right, that's very true. Putting it in context is an important factor. Okay, and then this is just kind of an overview of the timeline, and we're going to go into more details of kind of how the process unfolded. But we had 4 classes in progress right at closure of our facilities and our programming on March 13th. We didn't want to make those individuals wait, so we were back online and up and operating on Zoom within 2 weeks, which was pretty exciting. We didn't have to lose a whole lot of momentum. And everyone was talking about being on Facebook and spending all this downtime from all of these work from home and everything. Our lives got busier, not less so. So we had, after we finished up those initial classes on Zoom, we continued with Zoom only classes with an average of 12 to 15 all the way through April last year, at which point we came back in person. And then we had our first hybrid model class in October, and almost every one of them currently is a hybrid model. Go ahead, next slide, and I think I'll have Bob pick up for a little bit.
So what do we do now? Well, we had 4 classes in session. So what do we do now was what we thought of when we were on March 13th, when we were sent home. Well, we had 1 day class, 4 evening classes, and 1 anger management class going all at the same time. And we just got on the phone and talked with each other and tried to figure things out. Next slide, please. Okay, there's Zoom. We quickly realized we needed email addresses for all of our participants, and it really brought to mind the importance of gathering all the data that we could, so we don't have to scramble if anything like this were ever to happen again, because we really had to scramble to get all of their email addresses. Built a database so that we could work with Zoom. We made a bunch of phone calls and texts to all of our clients, all of our participants, and got their buy-in. We determined their technical needs. A lot of these people didn't have the proper equipment. We had people trying to do Zoom on their cell phones, and they didn't have enough battery power or data. Many of them didn't have a home internet account, and so we had to troubleshoot all that sort of thing. We ended up doing some loaners. That's the emergency technical support, some of it. We loaned out some laptop computers. We at one point we did some hotspots, loaned them out to participants, or we made arrangements so they could take the class by going someplace that would let them in, like a library or something like that. But even most of those were closed. So we did deliver the required devices, and most of that fell on Nicole at the time, because we were the only 2. Nicole and I at this point were the only 2 adult educators. So, and I live 43 miles away from the office, so she ended up doing an awful lot of running around. So we had to figure out how to do it, and then communicate with participants with what we were going to do, and we set out Zoom links each week. Next slide, please. So how's it going to work? Took a lot of time on the telephone on how to deliver the classes. We were novices when it came to Zoom, but we picked it up in a hurry. We modified the slideshow for online delivery, because our slideshows were set up for in-person in classroom delivery, and a lot of stuff was left off. We had to build things that would work on Zoom. We had to figure out the co-host and host on the fly so that we could both share screens and be able to deliver the services.
And I'd like to jump in too. Sometimes things changed on Zoom. So
yes,
as Bob said, a lot of the activities were set up for in-person activities. Then we had to utilize breakout rooms. I recall when we first started on Zoom, only the host, so only one person of the two of us could set up the breakout rooms. The co-host didn't even have those permissions. And so sometimes as soon as we would learn one thing, we'd have to also relearn it. So that on the fly is very, very representative of our experience going through that process.
and of course there's the bureaucracy we had to work with too. I'm not going to go into all of that, but just the point is that we had to get approval to do things, and we're the kind, we just do it, and we got it done. Next slide. How to keep them interested online? Well, we had to coach them to keep their video on and the audio, unless there was a lot of background noise. We had kids and spouses and pets and all kinds of things. We had to develop ground rules, make sure they were wearing clothing. Sometimes the clothing wasn't appropriate. Sometimes they were using substances while they were in class at home. Sometimes their spouses weren't exactly conforming to the behavior that we thought was appropriate. And of course, the children running, screaming, hollering. We actually had, the background. We mentioned the backgrounds earlier. The live backgrounds were interesting at times.
And also on the video on thing, as Bob mentioned, a lot of our participants were on with a cell phone, either a very old cell phone whose battery couldn't keep up keeping the camera on. So we would allow them to make an exception, but usually if most of the cameras were off, we would start at the beginning and say, if you have reasons why you can't keep your camera on, fine, we get it. But if you're getting a certificate for this class, especially those of you who are getting it for another program or to fulfill a requirement, we will be calling on you more often by name to speak out if your camera is off, so that we know that you're still there and engaged and participating. Otherwise, we can't issue you a certificate. And a lot of them would light up and pop on. But there would be those few that we knew if they didn't come on, it was usually because of either, technology, bandwidth, some kind of an issue.
Next slide. Okay, wait, we can help. Technical issues. Phone-only participants, we had to figure out how to get them power or get them internet. Bandwidth issues, we addressed that with a couple of hotspots we bought. And coaching participants how to use Zoom. They didn't know how to use it or even how to download it. And we were struggling trying to learn how to do it too, because we hadn't had that much experience with Zoom. As she mentioned, breakout rooms, muting microphones when needed remotely. Sometimes there's a lot of background noise. And of course, the loan of technology. And I just reached for the next button because I'm used to doing it myself. Next, please. I mentioned that I was 43 miles away. And so Nicole was.
Yeah, I can talk about what I had to do as a result of being the only one locally in Rapid City community. So our offices were closed. We couldn't meet participants here. So I was texting them, calling them, driving all around town, delivering surveys so that they could do those remotely, delivering program materials, books, curriculum items, picking up surveys at the end, issuing our participation incentives, all by driving around town quite a bit, put a lot of miles on. And we're not a very big city, but.
At one point, she even had to deliver a monitor to me, so I had the more equipment at home to be able to do what needed to be done. Next slide. To be continued. So we've provided at least 14 classes via Zoom during the 12 months of COVID shutdown before resuming in-person classes. It was a struggle, but we got that part done. We ended one grant, started another, and there was all of that paperwork and stuff that had to be worked with there. And so then in April of 21, we resumed our in-person classes and continued planning for additional shutdowns, which, that's just a precaution. We have email addresses for everybody. When we do the intake now, we have email addresses in Inform database, so that if this ever happens again, we can quickly export them into an Excel file and go for it. Next slide, please. So, participant engagement, one-on-one coaching the participants to address issues. We had one situation where we had a couple taking the class, and he would be off camera for a while and come back. This would happen quite often during the 2-hour session. And by the end of the class, he was intoxicated, big time. So I ended up having to counsel him, basically, at the end of the class when we had just those two on, and he ended up going into treatment for his substance abuse issues. That was difficult. Sometimes we had people sitting there drinking wine. We had one participant who would go off camera and use marijuana. These things were being done, and then we had to counsel them through it. We engaged we engaged them to find help for the substance abuse issues, and we called them out. So that, like Nicole mentioned, a lot of them are camera shy. It's amazing what a camera will do to people. It scares them. And some of them are actually ashamed of their homes. So we would teach them how to use the background that we were just learning how to use. And sometimes we had to talk to them about the family in the background. We did have a stereotypical spouse walking around, well, it says in dishabille in the background. He was walking around in his undershorts, and that was exciting. Next. Go ahead, Nicole, your turn.
Sure. So we, besides engage all the additional work it took to engage with the participants, we wanted to stay in connection with all of our referral sources, let them know that we were back up and running, that we weren't taking a pause, we were still having classes online. So we did a lot of that, and they were all out of their offices, of course, as well. We had to make some sort of accommodations with releases of information to those referral sources. So in lieu of a signed release, sometimes we would take an email or a text conversation with the participant, maybe screenshot it, save it, so that we would have that as our backup for being able to keep our referral sources informed of the follow through of the participants that they had sent over to us. Next slide. And, as we went through the statistics of who we're serving, obviously a lot of the eligibility or within that same classification of those being served by TANF, but the huge ways that we're supporting the goals of TANF is obviously through supporting strong relationships. And we, in our classes and with our participants, we define marriage as a long-term mutually committed relationship. Many of them may not actually get a legal marriage, but the more we can support them, and not using the word marriage as a legal document and having a ceremony might turn off some of our participants, but we want them to not cycle through relationships. And that is a step up, even if it's not fully to the goal of TANF saying, let's have more marriages, at least if they're staying together long-term to raise the children together, that's definitely supportive of those goals. And we do emphasize the importance of the relationship stability. We do offer employment services. Most of it is through referrals out to other organizations. We are developing some in-house. We've identified a gap, and we'll be working kind of on that. Conflict resolution, so people aren't losing their jobs over communication and skills and fighting with coworkers. We talk about dealing with money. The slide that you saw with how money affected a lot of the relationships with the changes in COVID. We talk about how to talk about money, the impact of friendships, and how that can conflict with the intimate partner relationship and sharing the individual's time. The executive functioning skills that were talked about earlier. A lot of our curriculum talks about how the brain works and how when we're triggered, what's happening in the brain. So if we understand what's happening, we can have strategies to help us work with our brain and not fight up against it. Next slide.
We have a lot of aha moments when people, oh, really? I could have had a V8 type thing. Yeah.
Yep. And then our one-on-one coaching is huge with this because they are working with them one-on-one. They meet the participants where they're at and walk alongside them. Whatever goals that person might have, Now, the family support coach will sit there and inside there thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you don't see how desperately you need ABC. And the participant is saying, no, I want XYZ, right? So we had someone say, nope, I need to get my cat neutered. That is my need, because if I don't, then my landlord is going to kick me out and not let me stay, and I can't give up my cat. I'll meet you where you're at, we'll do that. But after that, once they've met the participant with their very basic goals that they may disagree with, they're more likely to be open to suggestion for next goals and next goals on down the road. And they do a strengths-based approach. So what are their strengths, and help them to build on those. They're basically mentoring, helping them access resources, but also teaching them to navigate those systems and find those resources as they go forward on their own. Next. Oh, and that, I guess, I wasn't sure what, we probably should have put a closing slide. That kind of ended abruptly. So,
It did.
Bob, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, one thing we should mention is that the Tanf local Tanf folks have authorized their people to use our program as part of their their qualification to maintain Tanf eligibility.
Oh,
UL.
yeah, I see a question in the chat that I guess we could go ahead and address as well. So within our community, there's various organizations that provide resume assistance, job search coaching, job readiness, how do you present for an interview? How do you dress for an interview? How even, practice going through an interview, mock interviews. What we've noticed as a gap in our community is some people just have really negative views of work in general. It's a necessary evil, I hate it, They don't recognize the fact that maybe they can actually find something that they might be passionate about, they might enjoy. So we want to take a look, similarly to we do in our relationship classes, where we look at people's attitudes and beliefs towards relationships and where they come from, and their attitudes and beliefs about money and anger and where they come from. We also want to talk about, well, where does your attitudes and beliefs about work, where do they come from? So that by shedding light on some of those attitudes and beliefs, maybe they can be kind of changed and opened up so they're more receptive to the coaching and the resume polishing and the interview skills to get the work, because they may be motivated for the work itself.
And one thing that's interesting, you mentioned anger. Our anger management class has pretty much doubled in size since COVID really got the shutdown. It really has affected people that way.
All right, so yeah, so the next, I guess we'll be passing it on to Mariana for her program.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I guess I can start right away. Is that right? Well, I think that's the case. So thanks for inviting me. And in my presentation, I'll be talking about a program that I designed back in 2009 with an expert in financial counseling, and that we also have developed and adapted, not only linguistically, but culturally in Spanish, called Juntos en Pareja. So I'm going to be describing the program and why we have this program, the results of that we have from evaluating the effectiveness of the program, and then hopefully we have time, what has happened during COVID. So we focus, as it has been talked about earlier, on healthy couple relationships, because that's critical for emotional and physical well-being in general of all family members, effective parenting and co-parenting, and children's positive development, work and career satisfaction, and positive relations with other family members and friends and neighbors and the whole community. Next slide. So, but my own research, and in general, we know that financial issues, money, is the #1 stressor for families. Since 2007, the American Psychological Association has been conducting a stress survey, a stress in American survey. And since then, we know that consistently money is the #1 concern for Americans, people living in the United States. And it's also one of the reasons why couples seek therapy. And it's also the topic over which couples argue the longest and the more intensely about. So it's no doubt that sometimes that leads to separation and divorce. We also know that when we are concerned about money issues, we over time we may experience depression, anxiety, hostility, and that has an impact on our relationships, you know, with not only with our partners but in general. Next one, please. So we also know from research, and actually this is an area, I'm a faculty at the University of Maryland, and this is actually my area of research, this interrelationship between our concerns about the finances and money and our relationships. So far I've expressed how that has an impact, like the concerns about finances has an impact on our relationships, but it also works the other way about, that when our relationships are strained, we have more difficulties making sound financial decisions. And actually, if you talk to any financial coach or counselor, will tell you that many times is the emotional problems, either at the individual level or in the relationships, that really prevent people from making good financial decisions for themselves and their families. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, and it was discussed earlier, during COVID, there has been a huge increase in stress over money issues and in relationships as well. So we have seen also increase in mental health problems and separation, domestic violence, although for some families, we have heard some good experiences or some improvement in some areas. The reality is that for many families, particularly those with low incomes, there has been a loss of, you know, jobs, pay cuts, increase in debt, unpaid sick leave. Lots of these factors have had an impact on their stress levels, particularly when it comes to whether money will be enough for what they need. And let's not even talk about now, where with the increase in gasoline prices and the inflation that we're going through. So we're seeing even more stress about money issues. Next slide, please. So this was sort of my intro to sort of tell you why we developed Together. Together is a unique curriculum that we developed back in 2009. And if you think about the time, it was a time of recession. And the goal of the curriculum was sort of like focusing on both strengthening couple relationships and also trying to promote stability in finances. So we usually refer to this curriculum as a relationship education and financial education program. They are absolutely integrated, and you're going to see in a minute how we integrate it. But in that sense, it makes this curriculum stand out as a unique curriculum compared with other curricula that you see in other healthy marriage education programs. So the program overall also includes case management and employment support services, and therefore the goals are to improve healthy relationships, personal well-being, employment, and financial stability. And it's offered through the University of Maryland. The first time we got an HMRE grant was through Virginia Tech when I was faculty there back in 2015. But this second time in 2020, I'm a faculty at the University of Maryland, and so I continue with this program through the University of Maryland. Both universities where I was working earlier now are in the Washington metropolitan DC area. Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. I apologize for that. So next slide, please. So the services we offer through this program, Together or Juntos en Pareja, are, one is a workshop for couples, and I'm going to get more in detail to talk about that. This is a 14-hour, as I said earlier, relationship and financial education workshop. We also offer case management and employment services, and we provide gift cards for completion of surveys, and we also provide reimbursement for childcare that's provided by licensed childcare providers. Next slide, please. So in this, in the workshop, we focus on strengthening 4 areas of skills. On the one hand, individual and couple stress management. And this is very unique about the program. We just don't focus on how to manage stress at individual level, but how to do it with your partner. And all those skills can be transferred to other relationships. It could be how to manage, I would say, stress in general with other family members as well. Now you're gonna see, as I explain the curriculum, that we start talking from the very beginning about money and money stress in this case. And even though we're going in the workshop, we focus on how to teach couples to identify when they're stressed about money issues and how to handle them individually and relationally, we are expecting that those skills are transferred to other areas of non-financial stressors. And we will talk later how actually when we have evaluated the program, we see that participants that report not only improvement in how they manage their stress related to finances, but their stress in general. The second area that we focus on in terms of the skills is communication and conflict management. And again, we focus on communication about money, but that's sort of an excuse to really introduce the skills about how to communicate on difficult topics, and money definitely is one of them. We also focus on developing skills in problem solving. And again, our perspective is how to problem solve not only individually, but also together with your partner. And the last area of skills is financial management. We provide education and information about how to implement, adopt sound financial behaviors. Next slide, please. So the workshops that we have, this 14-hour workshop, usually has between 4 and 10 couples. We started this program in person, and then during the pandemic, we moved it online. And since then in this area, it has really stayed online. We have attempted several in-person workshops, but last minute, there's always a new increase in the incidence of COVID in the area, and people prefer to take it online. So since March 2020, we have been doing it online. We require that both partners are in attendance. It takes 6 weeks, usually the same day every week. Sessions are 2.5 hours, except for the first one that's 1.5 hours. And what we do is we use the first hour, we still ask them to come for 2.5 hours, but we use the first hour to enroll participants. And that has been a very effective strategy to go quickly from enrollment to actually start receiving services. Every workshop session is facilitated by the same 2 professionals. One is a couples expert and one is a financial expert. Usually the couples expert is a couple therapist, and the financial expert is typically a certified financial coach. We really believe that to conduct this program, it's better to have high training in couples dynamics and in finances, because sometimes questions arise that are not necessarily answered in the detailed manual that we provide to facilitators. So it's mostly psychoeducation, it's not therapy. We have a very detailed manual of 250 pages that details absolutely everything that the facilitators are supposed to do. And we really, when we designed this manual, we thought that it would be good to have a very complete manual so that this curriculum can be adopted and implemented in other places. And right now, there are different versions of that manual. We're going to talk more later, but initially the program was, the workshop was 20 hours long. Then we transformed it into 14 hours. Then we did a version online. Then we also transformed it and linguistically and culturally for Latinx couples. And now we're also working on another adaptation to work only with same-sex couples. Then we have, of course, activities, hands-on activities during the workshop. We have home practice. We also have recorded makeup sessions in case people miss the session. And we try to increase retention by giving gift cards for perfect attendance. Next slide, please. So this is, I think that these 9 modules give you a sense of how our program works. We go from understanding stress and money stress, managing stress and money stress by yourself, communicating stress in general and money stress to your partner, managing stress and money stress with your partner, communicating effectively and learning to talk about money. So you see how we go from what is stress, managing stress individually and with your partner, to communicating effectively and learning to talk about money. Then clarifying financial roles and expectations in the couple, improving money management skills, managing credit, and then we integrate everything through a module on improving the financial problem solving skills. Next slide. In the next slide, you have, I have two activities here that we won't have time to do or practice, but it gives you a sense of how we integrate the sort of like more psychological or emotional part with the financial part. I'm halfway through the end of the workshop in module 4. I'm sorry, module 5, session 3, we ask partners to interview each other and really learn about how they came to develop the relationship they have with money. So you have an example of question 1, what were the messages about money from family, relatives, friends, and community when you were a child? How do they affect your relationship with money? This is a sample of the questions that you have in that activity. And the PowerPoint will be available to you. So these are very good questions to also use for yourselves with your family members, because these are things that we typically don't reflect on, but during these activity, partners usually report that they really get to understand their partners better and they're less judgmental of them when it comes to their relationship with money. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, it's an example of another activity. It's called Money Habitudes, where in a playful way, both partners get to read cards and see what they identify with. So statements are like, for example, one statement that you have here is like, I like giving to others more than receiving gifts or help. And so they read all these cards and then they put them in different columns, depending on whether that describes them, or sometimes it describes them, or that's definitely not who they are. And then they turn around the cards. Can you go to the next slide, please? And they discover that they have different styles, like they are more into giving, carefree planning, they're more spontaneous, they're about maintaining status or about security. And I put there the link for this Money Habitudes game, because you can also obtain it by yourself. I have no relationship with the company, but it's definitely a very fun game, and it helps couples sort of in a playful way to understand each partner's relationship with money. Next slide, please. So what are the strengths of this curriculum? First, it was based on another curriculum that had proven to be effective. The second part is it provides an interdisciplinary approach, which is quite rare. Usually money is addressed in relationship education programs as just one module, one area of stress or one area of conflict. And here is absolutely integrated from the very beginning. The other piece is that this focus on financial education is particularly useful for working with low-income couples, and our program now is evidence-based, so I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Next slide, please. In addition, just want to mention that we also provide case management, and I'm not gonna talk much more about case management and employment support services. I would say that the initial presentation that you heard about how the HMRE grants evolved over time, and now how the financial stability and employment support together with case management are key components of these grants. So we also assess we provide one case manager per couple that assesses the needs of the partners and other family members in the household, and we connect them to services in the community. The case managers also serve as a point of contact for our program, and we typically have contact through, of course, Zoom meetings, but also via email, phone, and we also have an app that we have developed that helps keeps us connected at all times with the participants and the participants among themselves. This is a mobile app that we developed in this second cycle of the grant. Next slide, please. So these are common needs and referrals that we get for more therapy and mental health counseling, free tax prep, and home buyer education. Next slide. With employment support services, we, in order to refer participants to the needs they have, we are working at any given time with 50 community agencies, but we have a special agreements with employment support services. So, and we have an employment case manager so that we do a more thorough evaluation of the employment needs. And once we refer them to these employment agencies, we work closely in trying to remove barriers for participants to access services there. Next slide, please. And as I said earlier, these are gift cards that we give for workshop attendance and also survey completion and the reimbursement for childcare. Next slide, please. So in the granting numbers, since 2016, we have provided more than 165 workshops. And we have trained over 70 facilitators and given over $95,000 in gift cards. And over the 1,000 couples that we have enrolled in this program, more than 1,000 are African-American participants and more than 400 are Latinx participants. And 52.17% since we started offering the workshop, the program in 2016, they have an individual monthly income of $2,000 or less. This is really very low income in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, where it's considered that $46,000 or less for a two-person family is considered low income for that family. So we're definitely serving a majority of low income families. And 25.17% of the couples we serve are on some sort of government assistance. Next slide, please. So the program has been evaluated. I'm not going to go through the details of all the evaluations because it would take a long time, but it was first pilot tested and then it was evaluated through a randomized controlled trial. For those in the audience that may not be familiar with this kind of trial, this is really when you compare couples that have participated in the program versus couples that have not. So we have a control group that did not receive any intervention, then you evaluate the differences. And so we follow couples you know, in terms of how they did after the completion of the workshop and then 6 months afterwards. And then we did something not similar because we actually provided a workshop in 14 hours and we also compared the results of that workshop with the data we had gathered for the control group before. And right now we're evaluating the Spanish version and the online version, and eventually we'll evaluate once we introduce the same-sex couples version as well. Next slide, please. So what we found, this is the summary of the findings, and the next slides will have the details that you can look at them more carefully on your own when you have access to the PowerPoint. But in general, with a randomized control trial, we found that participants, even after 6 months, were reporting in the group that participated in the program way less lower levels of stress in general. They also reported better individual and couple stress management skills. They were making use of planning individually and together, being actively involved in trying to solve their problems. And as a relationship education program, they improved their conflict management. They reported better relationship satisfaction and relationship quality and less emotional abuse and psychological aggression. And being a financial education program as well, it was important that participants reporting using more budgeting and having fewer difficulties paying bills. We also have other measures of financial education, financial management, but we couldn't track, we saw improvements in the group that participated in the program, but they were not significantly different from the control group. And one thought is that over time, we really need to evaluate perhaps those financial behaviors through a longer period of time, because it takes some time for people to be able to not only implement new financial behaviors, but actually benefit from them. For example, in the area of credit. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to stop here. This is just the results of what I've just described, but more in detail. Next slide. So we find something similar for the 14-hour workshop, that it really behaved the same as the 20-hour workshop, which was was important because we thought it would be good to be able to do the same, achieve the same, but in less time, particularly for couples families that are really struggling with many responsibilities, particularly families with low income that can have several jobs. Next slide. So in terms of perception, almost 100% over time has said that the program has helped and they could handle conflict better and money better. Next slide. This slide really talks about how also the perceptions about facilitators work and how they were doing their job was very high from participants, and that the sessions themselves are evaluated every session, for content, organization, etc. The session itself, the facilitators, and the homework, all of them were rated always very highly by our participants. Next slide, please. So this is just a sample of testimonials. The first one, it says that they enjoy the program and that, well, I'm trying to look at time. Probably, I would go to the third column that says, even though we have been married almost 40 years, some of the techniques learned in the program have strengthened our commitment and communication. We now value others' opinion and let each other talk. The financial portion of the program, especially the credit portion, is helping prepare us for retirement. Next slide, please. In this one, I'm just gonna focus on the second column that says, I'm happy to report we purchased our first home in February 2021. I don't think we would have had the mindset to do so had it not been for the tips and insights offered by the counselors in the Together program, which shifted how we look at buying a home in terms of incorporating it into our budget. Forever grateful for the program, etc. So this is an example of, the positive impact in the community. Next slide, please. So we can ask more during the QA. We can talk more about during the QA round, but we have experienced a lot of challenges because we're working really with families with low incomes and with lots of challenges. At some points, we had to provide transportation. We really had to work very hard to find licensed childcare providers during the times the workshops were offered. Most of the families we work with had relatives and people they knew that they could take care of the family of the children, but we couldn't pay them because they were not licensed childcare providers. That's because of ACF rules. So that was a challenge. Obviously, during COVID, the challenge, we implemented everything that the previous grantee talked about, and we're doing the workshop through Zoom. And we have faced lots of digital and technological barriers. We have even gone to extremes of going to people's homes, lending them iPads and paying for Wi-Fi so that they could be connected. And we are dealing with technological and digital barriers. And we implemented a series of things for engagement. So, and we also provide refresher sessions. Because I'm over time, I think that this is at the end of all the slides. You have, if we can go through the next slide, just to show that we are present in social media. Well, anyone is eligible, 18 years and older and being in a relationship, again, English or Spanish. Next slide. You can sign up online, and togetherprogram.org is our website. Next slide. And we have a QR code here that you will have on the PowerPoint. Next slide, please. And here are, the email, phone number, and website all together. And again, you can follow us at Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, lots of different social media places. So sorry for taking more time, Robin.
You're fine. Thank you so much. Both presentations were wonderful. I think we have heard a lot of interesting information, and we've got some questions, and I have a few questions. So I'm going to kind of, in the interest of time, combine our panel discussion with Q&A. So I'm going to weave in some of the questions from our audience with some of the questions that we already have for the panel. And so I'm going to start with you, Bob. Bob, you mentioned helping get participants access to the internet and other needs for them to take the courses virtually. Could you talk a little bit more about how you assisted with this?
Yes. Well, we figured out that we really couldn't buy them internet access, but what we could do is help them purchase some minutes for their cell phones and maybe use those as a hotspot. We provided hotspots for some participants. We also, like as mentioned, provided laptop computers to a lot of participants, and so that they could access that way. Internet is kind of a hard one around here to access if you don't have the money to do it. And with the incomes that we deal with, a lot of them can't afford to do it. They have to make
And I would like to add how challenging and scary it was to be lending out technology to low-income individuals. We did have a couple of laptops disappear. We had one phone call from a pawn shop when they saw our number etched into the bottom. So there were definitely some challenges with that, but more often than not, the benefits of getting the skills and the education, and then an incentive to return the technology was usually enough to get those back, but occasionally we did have to accept a little bit of loss with that as well.
Can I add, because we are a grantee and we go by the same rules, it's true that we cannot purchase Wi-Fi for our participants, but with the hotspots, I think that has been the way we have helped them gain access. Instead of laptops, in our case, we have iPads. The iPads that we use for the service, those that were the ones that we lent. In our case, we didn't have a bad experience. People actually were very, very thankful. But I would like to highlight that the case managers played a key role in trying to remove the digital literacy barrier, in addition to the technological one. Yeah, there was a lot about what Robert was saying on helping them open an email account, helping them have check different, with a mobile app, we need to do a lot of also training.
So on that vein, Mariana, let me ask you a question about staffing and how staffing was impacted during COVID. So how did COVID affect the staff that work on the program? And did you have any challenges retaining or recruiting staff? We'll start with you and then we'll go to Nicole.
It has been a challenge and it's still a challenge. It was not during 2020. During 2020, we, similar to what Robert described in his grant, we were like very quickly, back offering services. We just took a break of 2 weeks and we were providing services where we're employing lots of people at a time where there was a need for work, and to work nicely. But I would say halfway, since July 2021 until now, from staff getting sick, job mobility, this is an area, the Washington DC area, where there's a lot of job mobility. So we are spending a lot of time training and retraining staff, even though we are constantly looking at what we can offer as a program to make it, worthwhile staying, because our salaries are not necessarily competitive. So because being in a university setting has a lot of challenges when it comes to these grants. One of them is, the informed consents and the amount of paperwork we have to go through with participants. But one of the benefits we have is that we provide education to case managers and to facilitators. So I've been doing more trainings for them than before as a way of creating a retention incentive for them. We've also made sure that the case managers and the facilitators are part of our partners meetings that take place once every 3 months with, as I said, 50 community agencies. And these are great opportunities for networking. So we're trying constantly to increase incentives, the retention, not just of participants, but also for our staff. And the last thing I was going to say, the other advantage of a university facility, but that can be available for other agencies if they work with the universities, is that there are a lot of graduate and undergraduate students that are desperately looking for internship or, hands-on, for opportunities to learn, for experiences that are going to help them not only learn the skills they will need in the future, they're going to look good in their resume. So they're really hungry for this kind of experiences. So we've been training. I think that we've dared train more than in the past, students to help and sometimes take over when case managers are not there. I wouldn't say for facilitators, but for case management, definitely. And that has been a very successful initiative. The students are grateful and it had really given us a sort of safety network to recruit from when we are running low on staff.
Great, thanks. Nicole, how about your organization?
We have definitely had some struggles, and it's mostly in a lower number of applicants than have been in the past. We've been fairly good at retaining, with a couple of exceptions that have happened, but it's definitely comes down to our work culture and flexibility. We very intentionally create that to be flexible in terms of when and how people do their work, and having a faith that they're going to follow through and get their own work done without dictating a lot of the hows and whys and micromanaging things, because it's definitely not the pay. I would echo what Mariana said, is that we're not, we're a nonprofit, and we're not necessarily competitive even within the nonprofit sector, much less when you start looking at the for-profit sector with our starting rates. So the getting them in the door is hard. The keeping them in has been something we've done intentionally.
And I'd like to point right off what Mariana said about the university setting. We are now involved with partnering with South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and we will be training all 45 of their RAs in the dorms through our active relationships class, so that they can pass on those skills or use those skills with all of the students on their floor. So that's an exciting opportunity. We're going to do that here very soon.
That's cool. So Bob, let me ask a follow-up question as it relates to retention more of the participants. What types of incentives does your program offer? Can you tell us a little bit about the types of incentives for participation and completion?
Right. Well, we have a couple of different kinds of incentives and program, what's the right word? Supports, that's the word I'm looking for.
I understand.
We'll provide gas cards. We provide lift to and from class when we need it. We'll sometimes pick people up as an incentive to get them to class. We provide snacks, we'll say, pretty healthy snacks for the participants. We also give Walmart gift cards. And did I mention gas cards? Yeah. So those are most of the incentives that we offer. We do have our family support coaches doing other things to keep them into the program. And as far as non-monetary incentives, some of the other classes we offer, because an awful lot of our participants in our relationships class now want anger management, or they want some other class that we offer. And it's conditional, being able to attend those classes is conditional upon completing active relationships class.
Great.
So that really is a non-monetary incentive. Yes, Nicole?
And I was going to say, those classes do have, it's non-monetary. They would have sometimes a fee associated with them or be completely unavailable to them without taking the active relationships class first. And then in terms of the monetary incentive versus the program supports of getting them to and from class, the Walmart gift cards, we were in our first grant not incentivizing on a standardized basis. We were offering that incentive to get people re-engaged. We started to realize we're a small city and the word's going to get out. If you don't go to class, they'll call you and offer you an incentive to come back. So we did standardize that, and we have adjusted the amount that we provide as an incentive various times throughout the history of our program. And that is because our recruitment has been pretty good. We have not really struggled to achieve high numbers of participants. We struggle a little bit with retention, again, because of the specific population with the high poverty and high barriers. But we really, at this point, are only doing a $25 Walmart incentive to complete 100% of the active relationships class, which seems like, well, why would that motivate people? It's a 12 to 14 hour commitment, 14 hours to get the gift card, 12 to complete the curriculum minimum to get a completion certificate. but we found that our numbers were so high that if we were incentivizing at the higher rates, we were blowing through our budget way too fast. So we're currently in a period of trying out this lower incentive rate and to see whether that is going to be an impact on completion rates or not, and whether we may need to kind of bump that up at all. But my jaw about hit the table here when I saw the amount that's being offered at the other program.
So can I?
Yeah, sure.
Can I add something? So yes, it's true. So what happens is this: through the HMRE grant, we offer $160 per couple, which is $80 per person. Okay, so it's really $80 a person compared to $25. The Washington DC area is very, very expensive, and so this came to be when we did the workshop in person, and just coming to our area, paying for parking, and all the different sites we had was a problem, particularly for low-income families. So then we had another source of income where we do additional evaluations. That's when we can add the additional $100. Historically, we have had few problems with retention, and we do a lot about engagement. But what we're experiencing more in the area, and we are not alone, because when we have these meetings with community partners, and there are social service agencies, most of them, we're having in this area a lot of difficulties engaging people these days in coming to our doors, more than we had before. And it's interesting because when the pandemic started, that was not the case. Those that we were, quickly offering services online, we were flooded with participants. And I would say through 2020, that was the case. And then things began changing. And I feel in my area, at least, families have been struggling with how to make it all work. We have some in-person services, some online, some hybrids. And I think people are exhausted and are burned out, professionals as well. And in that mix, sometimes they are more reluctant to add one more thing. And we see that this is happening also in other agencies. So we are trying sort of how to reinvent ourselves and make this worthwhile for families to come. But it's a struggle these days. So I don't have answers, but I just want to paint the picture of the area.
I do think that that's a common issue. So Bob, jump in here, and then I have one more question for you and Nicole.
I was going to mention that we have noticed engagement being a little bit more difficult also, but we've also noticed that we have served the easier to serve and are dealing with an awful lot with the harder to serve now. We partner with adult diversion, with the social service agencies, with court services, with parole services, with the, all, so we get a lot of referrals from them. And at least if you're dealing with diversion or parole or court services, we have that partner to keep them coming to the class because they require it as part of their release. And but some of the others who aren't involved with that just kind of come in, get the free food and leave and disappear.
Yeah, we serve couples, so that makes things challenging. Only couples, both partners have to be present. I do believe in the power of that, but at the same time, it brings a lot of more challenges for recruitment and enrollment.
It can. So Nicole, let me ask you one final question, because we're running out of time here. But also, before I do that, just a reminder, everyone, there will be a survey that pops up at the end. The link is in the chat now. And there's also a link in the chat for the bios so that you can learn more about today's presenters and contact them. So Nicole, one more question as a follow-up to some of what you guys have been talking about, how successful your program is. If you had to pinpoint one thing, what's the secret sauce that makes your program successful?
It's, I think, our people. To be honest, we when we meet participants for the first time and they come in and they do an intake with us, and we spend 20 to 30 minutes with them, and we don't just say, okay, here's a bunch of paperwork, let's just sit down, let's just fill this out. We connect with them, we listen to them, For safety and many other reasons, we do an intimate partner violence screening right at the initial intake. And it is amazing that when we have first met them for the first time, they'll actually open up and tell us some very deep and personal things. We started doing this through a research project under our former HMRE grant, where we were assessing what type of screening works. And we found that when we asked the questions of adults at the very first session, that the timing of those assessments didn't matter. And we also found that when we asked those questions up front and they confided in us these very, very deep personal things, there was a level of trust built up with our staff, our program, and that translated to trust in the classroom, even though they were in the classroom with multiple people who were strangers to them, because each of those individual participants trusted us. They translated that they were more vulnerable and open in the classroom environment, and that vulnerability and processing things and openness to communicate and learn really enhanced all of that, I think.
So what I'm hearing you say is that in healthy relationship work, relationships matter. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that's probably true.
Wow. Well, thank you all very, very much. We have one more polling question we want to jump to, polling question number 4. And we're going to ask you to share in the chat, how have you employed any of the strategies shared today? And what strategies would you like to learn more about? And although we won't get a chance to address all of this in today's session, this is always helpful in helping us to inform future sessions for these webinars. So I'll look forward to your answers in the chat, and then we are going to turn it over to James. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Robin. Just another quick reminder to everyone that a transcript, an audio recording, and a sheet of resources covered during today's webinar will be available in the coming weeks on the PRTA Network website, and you should see that website before you on the screen. We'd also like to hear from you about future webinar topics, so please send your ideas to us by email at PRTA@icf.com. You can also help us expand our network and reach greater number of people by directing interested colleagues from your local, state, and tribal networks and agencies to our website. And that is the last email site that you see there. Thanks again to our expert presenters, and a special thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We are going to launch a quick survey, as Robin already mentioned, for you to complete regarding today's webinar. That will appear in a separate pop-up window when the webinar ends. Your feedback is always very important to us, and it helps us to inform any of our future webinars. Thanks again for your time today, and we look forward to your participation in any of our future webinars. Everyone have a great rest of your day.